Hi, my name is Beth, and welcome to my March 2024 Reading Journal Wrap-Up. I'm beginning, like always, with my March cover page. I am once again using my Kobo that I still have not charged to trace the paper. Even though it wasn't charged when I filmed this, I can confidently say that it has since been charged. I have an e-reader, but I just don't use it all the time. It's something that I need to get better at doing. Although I will say I have read around 85% of all the ebooks I own, so that's pretty good. Anyway, for this month I went with this chevron paper. I'm still not sure if the lines on this paper are blue or black, but I ended up using a dark blue marker for these two pages. Like usual, I'm adding a quote on the left-hand side. The quote I chose for this month was, "My God, he is so easy to love." And this is from Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. I read this book last month and loved it and really wanted to use a quote from it for March. So I picked this one because it was short and sweet, and it's always easier to fit shorter quotes on this page. I'm adding the month to the right-hand side, but with that, we are done with the cover page. The first book I read in March was Circe by Madeline Miller. I was incredibly hesitant about picking this book up. I read The Song of Achilles years ago and didn't love it. I thought it was just fine. Although I assumed my feelings on the book were a result of me having the wrong expectations of what that book was going to be, I figured that if I reread it knowing everything that happened, I would probably like it more. I did eventually reread The Song of Achilles, but my opinions didn't change. I just thought the book was all right. I clearly don't like it as much as everyone else does, and that's okay. But it did make me a little nervous to start Circe because I was worried that I would also find it to be just mediocre. This book tells the story of the Greek goddess Circe. Growing up, she is shunned by her father, her siblings, and the other gods. She falls in love with a mortal man, and in an attempt to gain his love and affection, Circe manages to transform him into an immortal god. This effort backfires when he falls in love with another goddess. Circe bewitches this other goddess into becoming a sea monster, and as a result, she is banished and forced to live on an island in solitude for the rest of her life. The story follows Circe's life on her island and the encounters she makes as people visit her home over the years. I really hate to say it, but I feel very similarly about this book to how I did with The Song of Achilles. I thought it was fine. I don't love it, but it's certainly not the worst thing I've ever read. I just don't think Madeline Miller's books are for me. I understand that a lot of people enjoy her writing style, but I have never been a fan of flowery purple prose. I tend to find it a bit distracting. I get that it makes for beautiful language and ambiance, but I have found that more often than not, it pulls away from the story being told. I think that my biggest issue with the book, though, was that the entire first half felt very irrelevant. We get this whole story of how Circe is treated poorly, and we see how everything with Glaucus and Scylla goes wrong, but very little of this comes back later. Even some of the first people Circe meets while on her island get forgotten about. Their involvements in her life don't make lasting impressions. Halfway through the book, Odysseus is introduced, and this is where I think the story finally starts. His involvement in Circe's life continues to have long-lasting effects. His presence completely changes her story. I understand that we need to know context, but I think that if the first half had been cut down and the story focused mainly on Circe and Odysseus's relationship and everything that happens as a result, the story could have been a lot stronger. It might have felt like there was less filler, less pointless information. I had some Greek mythology stationery lying around, so I committed to the theme for this spread. I'm using some stickers from a stationery shop called Jolico, and I've paired them with an Aphrodite print from Sibylline Maynette. I'm sorry if this isn't good print etiquette, but I thought it would look really good in this spread. The green grid washi tape is from the stationery shop Ikigai Papier, and the rest are from Hobby Lobby. The stickers I used for Madeline Miller's name are actually stickers I got with some Moleskine notebooks years ago. I got a pack of composition books and these stickers came with them. I think I've had them for 5 or 6 years and I'm finally getting around to using them. I fully understand that I might have enjoyed this book more had I known more about Circe going in. It's a bit hard to see this as a retelling when I don't know the original myths. And while I did enjoy some aspects of the book and was genuinely surprised to discover certain things, I ended up giving Circe 2 stars. I thought the ending wrapped up a little too conveniently, and too much of the book made me wonder what any of it was even for. The next book I read was War of Streets and Houses by Sophie Yano. Last year, I was enrolled in 2 classes at my university before finding out that my school had wrongly changed my program requirements. So I was told that I needed to take these 2 classes to graduate when that wasn't actually true. I sorted everything out with the university and ended up dropping both classes, but of course, I only found out after I'd purchased all the books. And now I have a bunch of random books from these 2 classes just sitting on my bookshelf. But luckily for me, most of them sound interesting and I will likely read them. So I've kickstarted that reading list with this book. War of Streets and Houses is a non-fiction graphic novel about Sophie Yano's experience in Montreal during a student strike in 2012. The strike invites police brutality, which brings Yano to reflect on warfare tactics, advocacy, and loneliness. This book is really short. It's only 64 pages long. Despite that, there's a lot packed into it. I, unfortunately, did not like this book at all. There's a lot going on in the book, but at the same time, I don't think that it really knows what it wants to be talking about. There's a lot of focus on the strike, but it's never explained. Why are the students on strike? What do they want? And the police brutality is never explained either. Are the strikers evoking violence and the police are retaliating? Are the police just attacking because they can? I think this book assumes that its readers are familiar with this event because it takes no time to explain it, which puts people like me, someone who hadn't heard of this strike, in a tough spot. It's hard to compare the strike to historical military tactics like Yano wants me to when I don't understand the strike. I get that I could find answers quickly with a Google search, but within the parameters of the book, it should explain what's happening. There's also discussions on loneliness that pop up a few times. I thought those sections were good, but again, they make up very little of the whole book. I think the best word to use to describe this book would be disjunct. Every page jumps to a new scene in a new place where a new topic is being discussed. It feels very much like a stream of consciousness, like if someone just wrote down their thoughts without caring that they jump from one topic to another. There's very little flow, and the art style is like that too. Sometimes the images are clear and discernible. Other times, the illustrations look like they were drawn by a completely different person. There are some illustrations that only provide allusions to what's in the image, so sometimes it's hard to know what's there. The characters can be hard to differentiate from each other, and sometimes they blend in with the background. I can appreciate when artists have their own style, but when I can't discern what I'm looking at, it makes reading very difficult. To decorate this spread, I primarily used a sheet of washi stickers that I had and paired it with a bunch of other blue stationery. I used some butterfly stickers from Ikigai Papier and some flower stickers from Jolico. I like to try and create spreads every once in a while that aren't just inspired from a sticker sheet so that I can use more of my stationery. It also challenges me to think outside the box a bit in terms of how I'm going to lay everything out on the page. Sometimes they don't go very well, but I think this one turned out all right. Unfortunately, this book was not for me. I read some reviews of people comparing it to poetry, and maybe that's why I didn't like it. I don't enjoy reading or writing poetry, so it very well could be that. But I gave War of Streets and Houses 1.5 stars. It was just a little too jostling of an experience for me. For my last book of March, I'm coming to you from a new table. I went to my parents' house for Easter and I finished a book while I was there. Luckily, I brought all my stuff with me because I predicted that this might have happened. Anyway, the next book I read was Strangers by Taiichi Yamada, translated by Wayne P. Lammers. I mentioned in my reading journal setup that I was planning on picking this book up this year. I wouldn't say that it's a particularly popular Japanese novel in terms of Western standards, but I do think that this book has gained a bit of interest over the past few months. In December, a film adaptation of this novel was released called All of Us Strangers. I learned about this film at some point during its production, and I thought that the premise sounded pretty interesting. Strangers is about a middle-aged screenwriter named Hideo. He is recently divorced and his ex-wife took the house, so he's been living out of his office in this office apartment building. He initially believes that he is the only person living full-time in the building, but he quickly discovers that there is a woman, Kay, also living out of her office a few floors down. Because they are the only two people in the building at night, they get to know each other. At the same time, Hideo, in his newly divorced life, takes it upon himself to revisit his hometown for the first time in decades. He only lived there until he was 12 because his parents died. But upon returning, he meets a married couple who look identical to his parents from the year they died. This is a novel about love and grief and realizing what you might have done differently had you known your time with someone was going to be cut short. So I know that I wanted to read this book and I was going in hoping that I would like it. But I was so genuinely surprised by this book in the best way. I was really impressed with the story and its complexity. I feel like from the way I've described the book, it sounds like it's a bit sappy, and it is emotional, but I would say that this book is a very light horror novel. It's eerie, there's some supernatural elements, and Hideo goes through an entire emotional journey trying to rationalize how these people who resemble his parents could possibly exist. I am not very familiar with Japanese fiction. I've only read one manga series in my life, and this was my very first Japanese novel. It definitely hit the weird and out-of-the-box style that I was expecting, but it also diverted my expectations. From what I've heard regarding Japanese classics in particular, if they're written by and about men, the protagonists tend to be very self-deprecating, lonesome, and more often than not, sexist. I do think that Hideo is a lonely character, but I wouldn't describe him as self-deprecating or lonesome. He's realistic about his situation. He isn't pitiful about the way his life has turned out. He knows that the only person to blame is himself, and because of that, he chooses to be a glass half full kind of guy. My favorite aspect of this book was watching the relationship between Hideo and his neighbor Kei develop. They are two lonely people with their own pasts, and the unlikely circumstance of being alone in an apartment building brings them together. I found their relationship realistic and trustful and honest. It was slow and fragile, but I enjoyed the chapters with just the two of them chatting in the apartment. I did also enjoy Hideo reconnecting with his parents. There's this progression from fear and disbelief to eventual acceptance and longing for this new relationship. It was a really interesting and beautiful way to explore grief. And I also absolutely loved the ending. I read a few reviews of this book after finishing it, and the ending was often criticized, but I really liked it. Without saying too much, I thought that it fit with the direction and the themes of this book really well, and it made for a shocking, exciting ending that I will definitely remember. I primarily decorated this spread with a Dalmatian sticker sheet from Marigona Suli Art. The pink flower washi tape at the top of the spread is also from her store. I did end up watching the movie after I finished the book. While most of the story was the same, they definitely made some changes. The most obvious one being that Kay's character is gender bent. Her character is played by Paul Mescal, so that opens up a lot of opportunities for narrative differences. The movie also got rid of all the horror elements, so it made the ending a little bit lighter in tone. I liked it, but I think I enjoyed the novel more. I gave Strangers 4.5 stars. I thought it was a great, spooky deep dive into grief with really good character relationships. And that is it for my March reads. I can't say that it was the best of reading months, but I did read a book that I really, really liked, so I'll give it that. I had wanted to read more than 3 books in March, and originally I thought that I had set myself up to be able to do that, but unfortunately I didn't make that happen. But I can already tell that April is going to be a pretty productive reading month for me. I also just want to say a huge thank you for 1,000 subscribers. I'm really glad that there are people enjoying my content because I'm having a lot of fun making it, so thank you. Thank you very much for watching my March wrap-up. I hope you have a great rest of your day.